What's up, everybody? Welcome back into Lettermen Row for another position week. Quarterbacks, check. That week is over. Go get all that coverage at lettermenrow.com. Subscribe if you haven't yet. And if you haven't yet, what in the world are you doing? Look at this. We got it going right here. Anyway, that's the story for the end of the video. I'll plug lettermenrow.com then. This is Lettermen Row. This is tight ends week. We are on to tight ends week, fellas. The 40-year vets in May, Andy Backstrom. Hope everybody had a great Memorial Day, great time with family, great cookouts if that's what you do.
Indy 500.
Indy 500 if that's what you do. Golf tournament if that's what you do. A lot going on. Baseball, Cracker Jacks, apple pie, the whole 9 yards. America. Now we're on to Ohio State tight ends. Nobody may be more American than Cade Stover, the all do it all Ohio State tight end, the farmer, the meat salesman, the meat butcher, whatever you want to call him. You can just call him captain because he's the leader of this unit, Tim. And when you have a guy coming back that's got over 30 catches, that's got the yardage that Cade Stover did, the production, the durability that he did, I give him a lot for durability, even though he missed the latter half of that Peach Bowl with something
latter three quarters.
something that he couldn't control. But he's a very durable player, and he's going to be the leader of this unit, no matter what, Tim.
Yeah, and losing him in that Peach Bowl when it happened. Ohio State got it going even without him, but that was still just like losing Marvin Harrison Jr. beginning of the fourth quarter, into the third quarter. That was still huge, man, because of what Cade Stover, like you said, offered. And they were planning to push the ball down the field to him as much as they were anybody else in that game. Cade Stover, man, have we seen a guy make Cade Stover make himself over? That rhymes. Several times we've seen a guy do that as well as he has. I'm not sure I have covering Ohio State football, going from offense to defense to offense to defense, finding his way finally as a tight end and quite a capable. It's not just that he's a tight end; it's more like the athletic ability he brings to that position. And yes, I mean he's buying away the number one tight end. He might be the number one tight end returning in the Big Ten. I guess we'll see as the season progresses, but they've got to like the fact that they've not only got a proven, capable pass catcher and runner with the ball after he catches it, a proven and capable blocker, but also a quite proven leader returning in Cade Stover, who definitely you got to figure is going to be a captain again.
Andy?
Yeah, I mean, Tim was mentioning it, the ability after the catch, 211 yards after the catch for Cade Stover last year, which was fifth in the Big Ten. When you think about the guys in front of him, it's a lot of players who were the heart of their passing attacks, whereas Cade Stover was just another dimension to an already elite passing attack with two 1,000-yard wide receivers. So having that threat down the middle of the field is super important. CJ Stroud utilized it very well. It will be the best friend to either Kyle McCord or Devin Brown, whoever ends up starting, to have that really just big body down the middle of the field, whether it's in the red zone or even just anywhere else on the field. It's important, and it will be open most times because of the threats that they have on the perimeter with Marvin Harrison Jr., with Emeka Egbuka in the slot, and then Julian Fleming on the other side. You're really going to have a lot of opportunities to attack down the middle of the field. That's what Cade Stover can do. And he looked like really, really slimmed down. I mean, not to the point where it's a concern, but in a good way, athletic this spring. I felt like he really maybe shed a little bit of weight and looked to be even smoother running routes. So that's something to keep an eye on and just see how much he can build off of last season where he had more than 30 catches.
Yeah, he's got to build on his craft. He's still a young tight end in a way because he played some offense, he played some defense. They finally stuck him at tight end. He did a really good job. But I think there's still always that learning that he's got to do, even through this year with Keenan Bailey. And Keenan's done a really nice job with him, the new tight ends coach, even before he became the tight ends coach, of working with him on his route concepts, on running routes, on being able to get to the top of his break, to be able to snap off the break like a wide receiver, but also be able to block like a left tackle. Cade can do a lot of things, and that brings me to the next point as we move along here on the offseason report tight ends edition presented by Buyers Autos that, you've got to have a number two tight end. You're always going to love 12 personnel. That's what Ohio State does. You can't love 12 personnel if you don't have the guys to run 12 personnel. So is it going to be G. Scott? Is it going to be Joe Royer? Those are the two lead candidates to be the second starting tight end. I know, I promise we're going to get the Jelani Thurman guys. But, as far as starter.
You just said that to appease me, but go ahead.
As far as starter on day one, alongside Cade Stover, it's either going to be G. Scott or Joe Royer. I don't think there's much pushback from. I don't think there'll be much pushback from either of you guys there. But like, one of those guys is going to have to step up in that 12 personnel or to be that second tight end. God forbid something happens to Cade Stover and take over there. And so, is it Joe Royer? Is it G. Scott? Good news. There's two options there. Ohio State has options for those two fourth-year players, Tim.
Yeah, but man, I'm not jumping ahead here. They took Jelani Thurman's black stripe off pretty damn fast. And he's on a fast track to get into that mix. So end of August, I think we'll have this discussion again. We'll see how it's going. But yeah, Joe Royer getting shoved into the game against Georgia, and I thought played pretty well at times didn't, if you go back and watch the video. Wow. Because I would think he went into that game thinking, I might get in a few plays, but am I going to, how much of this double tight end personnel are we going to get into? He wasn't really clear. G. Scott the same way. But yeah, I think both of these guys, and it's time for G. Scott. This preseason camp is going to be huge for him because of that switch he made when he was one of the highly touted wide receivers coming into Ohio State a few years ago. It's kind of put up or shut up time for him to prove his worth. And, we all know this, that headbutt situation that happened late in the year against Michigan, that didn't help his cause, because they want to be able to count on him to keep his head, among other things. And clearly he played against Georgia some, so they got over it pretty fast. But the bottom line is, this is his moment. I think he's got a lot of ability to show he is that tweener guy when it comes to tight ends who could really, we talk about stretch the field, could really stretch the field for this offense, and the new quarterback who looks to be Kyle McCord with Devin Brown maybe pushing. But the bottom line is, he has ability to really even expand what they expect from that tight end position in the passing area. We've been hearing about that for 2 years now. Maybe it'll finally come to fruition.
Andy?
Yeah, well, Joe Royer was poised to maybe be that starter, not only the number 2, but the number 1 tight end last season before Cade Stover switched back over to offense. So it's not like he hasn't been in this position before where there is the opportunity for more playing time. Now it seems like it'll be the number 2 role if he ends up winning this battle with G. Scott. But I think if you're looking at Joe, a good inline tight end could supply like good blocking. Honestly, he looks bigger than ever in terms of muscle and in terms of power coming off the line, which is really encouraging if you're watching this tight end group, because you want to complement a receiving tight end like Cade Stover, who can be in the slot. Cade can also block pretty well, but he's lining up in the slot 10 to 15% of the time he's on the field. And you want the other tight end in 12 personnel to be a reliable inline blocker. And I think when you're looking at least the frame and the tenacity of Joe Royer, that's something that really pops off the page. So that's encouraging. For G. Scott, I think you do have to tip your hat a little bit and say, hey, that situation that Tim mentioned with the headbutt was not ideal. Certainly wouldn't condone that behavior if you're any coach, but he did stick around. I mean, sometimes you see players have instances like that happen. They check out, they transfer, whatever. And he's still here, still grinding. It seems like he's grown from that moment. So there is that to say about that. And it does seem like both of them are competing for tight end too.
Both of them had really good spring periods, I thought. And, it's funny that you mentioned that about Joe. He's become a pretty good blocker. He was more of a receiver than any of these guys were. Even G. Scott, when he was in high school, Joe was a glorified just wide receiver who they knew at the next level was going to be a tight end. It's crazy that he's developed into what he is. If I had to lean right now, I would probably say Joe Royer is the number 2, but I think there could be a good rotation there and a good mix between Joe and G to make sure that you're keeping those guys on the field and getting them the reps that they probably deserve. I thought, both of them earned some valuable reps coming in the fall when they performed as well as they did in the spring. So, that's something to keep an eye on. I definitely think that it's worth a conversation in August on which of those guys is going to emerge among them to become the number 2 tight end. Of course, now is the time that I'm allowed to, or I'm giving myself to cut Tim loose on here and tell me why Jelani Thurman deserves to be in that conversation.
Well, it's not so much what I think. I mean, I was paying attention, during the spring, like you guys were, and he got a lot of reps. I mean, for all kinds of reasons, but he got a lot of reps and performed. And the big question, like Keenan Bailey was talking about when I wrote a story about it at LettermenRow.com in the middle of spring, was with these tight ends, you are the reason Ohio State goes and signs Joe Royer and goes and signs Jelani Thurman. Not so much Cade Stover. Cade Stover was pretty much a jack of all trades in Lexington, Ohio, but is the first attraction is them being able to catch the ball, and be a field stretcher or perceived field stretcher. That's why you go after these guys. Just like in basketball, but most basketball coaches don't go out and recruit a guy who's averaging 2.1 points per game. But boy, oh boy, is he good on defense. The first thing that attracts you is how good you are on offense. And kind of the similar, you can make that same kind of argument for the tight ends. But Jelani Thurman proving what a threat he could be in the red zone and especially goal line offense with his, what is he, 6'5", 6'6", whatever he is. He looks huge out there. And then on top of that, he's going to be even bigger than he was when we saw him in the spring after like another 4 months under Mickey Marotti and the nutrition staff at Ohio State. They really like him a lot. And like I said, when they take a black stripe off a guy, a freshman, as early as they did with him and Carnell Tate, those guys are in their plans. They're already thinking about these fellas. And it means they're also being fast-tracked, for want of another term, to be ready to contribute this season, perhaps sooner rather than later. So I'm pretty much just watching, as I like to say, the train come clickety-clack right down the track about Jelani Thurman, because some guys come in and there's a reason that you need to get him on the field sooner rather than later.
Andy?
Yeah, Jelani was certainly the first early enrollee that caught my attention just because of what Tim said, the size. You look at him, he dwarfs over people. But I think something that Spencer's talked a lot about this offseason, which I agree with, is that with tight ends, it does take a little bit of time to develop because often they don't get playing time until they're ready to contribute in both facets, the blocking and the receiving aspect of it. I think the receiving can come quicker than the blocking aspect of things. I think that's kind of what Spencer was alluding to with Joe Royer at times too. Like, it seems like he's really worked on himself to get that body, to be more of an inline guy, to be able to fill that role. For Jelani, it seems like he could contribute right away in the receiving portion of the game. I don't know where he's at in terms of the blocking, and that could be maybe what holds him back initially. But I also see what Tim's saying. I mean, maybe there's certain goal line packages. I think there's a way to get your best players on the field at all times. Maybe it's for 1 or 2 plays, even in a game where you find a spot for him. So he is certainly intriguing. We saw him sit in the middle of the field, have a couple of receptions during the spring game. We saw him in spring practice, have success. He's certainly someone that jumps off the page. And when you look at this class that was just brought in, he's right near the top of the guys that's already contributing.
Yeah, and let me add something, Kenneth Spencer. Like for example, I was talking with Kevin Wilson, now the head coach at Tulsa, but the tight ends coach, offensive coordinator the last several years at Ohio State, and we were talking just specifically about G. Scott, and like last year, they really liked his progress, the way he was coming along, even in preseason camp. But in this modern age, you've got to establish that G. Scott going in the game doesn't mean they're about to throw the ball to him. You know what I mean? As a tight end, they needed to establish him as a true tight end going in the game, who, by the way, happens to be a hell of a receiver. And that's why they were, they like going into the Notre Dame game last year. That's hard for me to say 3 times in a row. They were a little reluctant maybe to put G. Scott in there in that kind of situation, but bring him along in those other games where he can get some confidence as a blocker, as a true tight end, and establish himself, more importantly, on video that other teams will be watching as they play you later in the year as a true tight end. And that's what they'll be facing, a similar challenge, like, for example, with Jelani Thurman. But in my take on that also is, though, if a guy gives you an advantage in the red zone just because of the target he presents, whether he's a good blocker or not, you got to figure out a way to exploit that sooner rather than later. That's why I think they really liked what they saw from Jelani in that regard, which is why I think he, we may not see him play more than 5 or 8 or 10 plays a game, but I think we might see him sooner than later. I think that's the 4th time I've said that.
Listen, I'm not, and I don't want to make this into an argument show. This isn't First Take. I'm not saying.
Why else are we talking?
I'm not saying, and I haven't been saying since March, that I think Jelani Thurman sucks and that he should be on the
No, you haven't.
for every play. But here's the deal, guys. If you play him, he is not ready to block. I've talked to Jelani a couple times. There's an NIL event. I got to talk to him for a little while. I would tell him this. I don't know if he's ready to block yet, because I watched him in the spring game against guys that probably aren't going to get a ton of time on the Ohio State defensive line, and there were times of struggle in the blocking game. If you send him out there and teams know he cannot block, Ohio State's not going to have him out there to block. And so then you are telling everyone you are passing the football. And
but you know what? Yeah, but he'll be a mismatch in the secondary. When he's in the secondary, he will be a mismatch against most of the guys who will be trying to cover him from a physical standpoint. And blocking wise, of course we all know how coaches work. They're not going to put him out there till they feel confident about him. I mean, Keenan Bailey has said that. I mean, you got to have a modicum of blocking ability when they put you in at tight end. Like I pointed out just before a while ago about G. Scott. You've got to have the threat of that, but sometimes just getting in the way is pretty good too.
And then here's the other deal. If you have him in the game, you are either saying he's better at blocking than one of the tight ends, which I firmly do not believe, or he gives you as much of an advantage from a receiving standpoint as one of your wide receivers, and you're taking wide receiver off the field, which I don't think he does. And so it's almost a little bit like, Brian Hartline talking about Jaden Ballard, like he has to give us a reason to play him. He has to be better than one of these guys at more than one thing for him to be on the field for meaningful reps. We remember him talking about that, at the table there when we spoke to the wide receivers. Jelani Thurman is going to have to be either better at blocking than one of the tight ends that's going to get playing time, or a bigger threat, even in the red zone, than one of the top receivers is. Is he either of those things? That is what will determine his playing time. Not, he could give us an advantage because he's tall.
Dude, did you? I mean, you were watching spring just like I were. I know we're arguing here, but not truly arguing because we're presenting scenarios that the fans don't even get to see. But it was obvious to me that both Devin Brown and Kyle McCord recognized as spring went along what the 6'6" or whatever he is, Jelani Thurman presented to them in the back of the end zone from a target standpoint, and they took advantage of it on quite a few throws that I was watching. And some guys are good blockers, but aren't necessarily very good receivers or good targets as receivers. So there's always a balancing act going on, especially when you're talking about tight ends and what what the advantage they present to you, because hardly anyone's ever been a perfect tight end. I mean, Cade Stover really probably is not a perfect tight end. You understand what I'm saying? But he has things they exploit, and that's what I'm talking about.
Andy, save us. Save both of us, please.
I mean, he's only 15 practices in. Like, he's got a lot of time to develop. I think he's got a full camp. Hopefully he stays healthy. And then you got a few games to play around with before he burns his red shirt. As Eric mentioned in this conversation, we should probably talk about it. It's just, or touch on. It's just that, if you have him in a couple plays per game, well, if he plays more than 4 games, then you're burning the red shirt. Is that something you really want to do with someone that could be a multi-year starter potentially down the line? I don't know. I mean, that's something that Keenan Bailey, Ryan Day, Brian Hartline have to decide. And so it's kind of what Spencer said, like, you got to figure out if it's worth having him in for that rotational purpose. I think you kind of experiment with it in the first couple of games, the Youngstown State game, those are opportunities to see how does he stack up against other competition. So we'll see. But he's certainly intriguing. And it's a plus for Ohio State to have even something like this that could be potentially tight end 4 and draw so much intrigue.
Absolutely. And, again, I have completely softened my stance. I do believe he will play. How that happens, I just don't know. Like red zone against Notre Dame, no. But like red zone against Youngstown State, sure, get him out there, see what he can do. So I just think that there's a little bit of a balance there. Maybe find a way to sneak him on the field at times. Find ways that he can manipulate defenses and be that mismatch. But he's not going to be that Rob Gronkowski mismatch always in the red zone against every opponent. And I think that's where maybe the hype train has gone a little.
Well, I'm just talking red zone. I mean, I think he is a bigger mismatch in the middle of the field on some plays in the middle field where the defense is more stretched out, even because he proved he will go over the middle and will catch the ball. And when you get in that little intermediate zone between the linebackers and the safeties, whatever, I mean, he can be quite the target. Yeah, I'm not going over the top. It's just rare you see a tight end come in who is this physically imposing looking or impressive looking, and then the coaches also prove by their actions that they think he can help them sooner rather than later. That's the fifth time I've said that, I think. But you can just tell by the way he was being utilized, including losing his black stripe, that they see something in this guy that's special.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think he had a great spring. And
I just go by what they think, because what I think isn't going to get him on the field one way or the other. But if the coaches are looking at him in that regard, that's how you get on the field.
He's either going to be on the trajectory of a Garrett Wilson, who ended up playing a lot as a freshman, or a Kai Stokes, who had a great freshman spring, went through that developmental year once he got into true game prep, and then now we see if he can become a playmaker. Those are the two paths, I think, for freshmen at Ohio State, especially if you flash in the spring like that. Obviously, have to mention the rest of the room. There's some good pieces in there. I think Bennett Christian is still on a good developmental path at 6'5", a big body. I think he can really help this team down the road. Does that happen this year in year 2 at Ohio State? Maybe not. But you have the potential to lose Cade Stover and Joe Royer and G. Scott. Bennett Christian's got a place in this offense. He's got a place in the future of this offense. I think that he's a good piece. Sam Hart, year 3, can he find a way to maybe wiggle onto the field in some certain scenarios, some certain packages, maybe some heavier stuff? Really talented, athletic guy, was a wrestler in high school. You like what you see from him, but it's just a crowded room right now. And I'm not sure, both he and Bennett Christian both. And I think there is reason to, for now, still, just because it's only been 15 practices, put Jelani Thurman in a little bit of that category, a little bit of that, maybe Venn diagram that two places overlap, the playing time, the not playing time. He might be in the middle there because you're not really sure how he'll handle August. So, this is a room that's got even at the bottom of that depth chart, the bottom, with Bennett Christian and Sam Hart, and to an extent Jelani Thurman. It's a talented group, guys, and I think that they can really make some noise in this room. This tight end room, it's got me excited, for Keenan Bailey to be working with him in year 1.
Yeah, and Bennett Christian's definitely got the hair. You know what I mean? I mean, there's all kinds of things you like about these guys. And it's kind of like what we talked about in the spring about the wide receiver room. It's time, sometimes it comes sooner rather than later, but, with like a Jelani Thurman coming in, it's urgent time now for Bennett Christian and Sam Hart to prove what they're about, leading toward, like you said, even next year, and setting the table and finding a niche there instead of finding a reason maybe to leave, a reason to stay. And that's imperative on the coaches, to Keenan Bailey and those guys, to help these guys find that too. And I wasn't by any stretch putting those guys down. I was just talking about when you saw Travion Henderson the first time on the field running the ball a couple of years ago, the wiggle he had was apparent to anybody watching that he deserved early consideration for playing time, and he got it, and Jelani Thurman showed early consideration, in my opinion, to be considered, that's redundant, for playing time. I think in the spring that he is somebody not to just not for the coaches to say, okay, let's keep him in mind for 2 years from now, keep bringing him along. I think they're bringing him along faster rather than slower. And, but it's the same thing with Bennett Christian. He's got the ability. Sam Hart's got the ability. These guys were highly touted. And it's just a matter of putting it all together, rising to the challenge of the competition, because when you've got 3, maybe 4 guys ahead of you, perhaps coming out of the spring, you've really got to have a hell of a preseason camp.
Andy?
Yeah, I think Bennett Christian has impressed. I mean, he lost his black stripe last December during Peach Bowl prep, which certainly should be noted here. And then also, too, it's a little bit different situation with Keenan Bailey as a position coach, because normally when you have a new position coach, sometimes you're bringing someone in from the outside. Well,
Yeah.
Keenan Bailey has been in the program for quite a long time now, and he's worked with the offensive linemen. He's worked with the wide receivers. He's been around the tight ends. So he knows Bennett Christian. He knows Sam Hart. He knows some of these guys are maybe a little bit lower on the ladder or the depth chart of this tight end room, but they're not being discounted. And, yeah, he's going to bring in his own guys. He already has Max LeBlanc, who committed earlier this cycle. And, normally with a new position coach, you'd be like, well, maybe those guys get a leg up because they're the ones being recruited by this new position coach. But I do think that because he's been around, everyone's going to be on somewhat of an equal playing field. I don't see him picking favorites or anything like that. So I think there is time for mobility and development for everyone in that room. And as Spencer mentioned, they need that because they could have quite a few departures when you think about it for next year.
Hey, can I throw one other thing in there too? I wanted to ask both of you guys, do you feel like the way they used Cade Stover last year actually threw the ball to him? That should enhance down the road. I mean, Keenan Bailey's recruiting ability, right? I mean, the offensive staff. Do you think they've kind of made some inroads in that regard? I think they have.
Andy, I'll let you go first because when I say it, I'm going to wrap up the show.
Yeah, I think he definitely has. I mean, he was the first. Cade Stover was the first tight end at Ohio State to have 30 or more catches since Ben Hartsock in 2003, I think. So that's quite a long time, a couple decades. And anytime you can reintroduce a position to the passing game in that level, I mean, tight ends always had somewhat of a role at Ohio State, but to get back to a 30-plus catch stat line for a tight end, one, says a lot about Cade Stover because that he deserves a lot of credit for that, but also says a lot about the offensive philosophy. And I think it's, that's where the game's shifting. Tight ends are so valuable in the college level, in the NFL level. And I think you need to have that dimension, no matter how good your wide receivers are, because they add something new to the offense.
Yeah, and as you know what I've always said, no one covers the tight end almost at any level, or at least consistently. And that's why, I mean, if you can get receiver types out there, you got something going. I think Ryan Day totally understands that.
Yeah, and that's why I will agree. I think that it does help with the recruiting process. Matt and I are going to talk about that at lettermenrow.com this week, by the way, in the Letterman Lounge episode. The tight end recruiting at Ohio State's looking up. I will say this, it's interesting. Look back at some of the bigger games in Ohio State the last few years. I think back to the national championship game with Nick Van Ette. The tight end caught a touchdown pass against Oregon. People forget that because of the way Zeke played, but yet a tight end touchdown. 2018 Rose Bowl, Ohio State needed another touchdown to really extend that lead and get over Washington. Who catches a touchdown? I think people would forget this. Rashad Berry caught a touchdown in the 2018 Rose Bowl from.
What did I just say? But what did I just say, Spencer?
But yes, the tight end. But what I'm saying is they don't.
I know. Well, I'm not arguing with you. I mean, if you don't exploit that at any level of football, you're kind of leaving things on the table. That's why Tom Brady was so good. He had good tight ends, but he knew what the situation was. You know what I mean? That's why I've remember when Jim Knowles told me, boy, you got this fixation with tight ends. Remember that in one of those interview situations, just because nobody consistently, even Ohio State doesn't consistently cover the tight end. And so you've got to exploit that. And I think they've got the personnel in the tight end room now to definitely exploit that, because anybody can throw the tight end, but is he going to catch it? Well, they've got some guys that have proven they can catch it. And that's, like you just pointed out, and that really comes to bear in the big games when the other team is bound determined to take Marvin Harrison Jr. or Emeka Egbuka away from you. When you've got that guy running over the middle or in, a little slide action or a little shoot route or something like a tight end can run, that can be so valuable to you. The bigger the competition, the more valuable that becomes.
My point that I was getting to, Tim, was that even when Ohio State wasn't throwing the ball to the tight end regularly, tight ends always showed up, like you said, in those big games.
Yeah.
And that it's always just the craziest thing is, like, you'll never remember Rashad Berry caught a touchdown pass in the 2018 Rose Bowl, but he helped them win the game. And so it's moments like that. They've always thrown it to him, but I think that now it's out on Front Street, and so Ohio State will be able to recruit tight ends based on throwing it to them. You didn't know you needed 30 minutes plus on the Ohio State tight ends in the middle of May, And guess what? You definitely needed it from LettermenRow.com, from Tim May, the 40-year vet, from Andy Backstrom. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Again, 30-plus minutes on the Ohio State tight ends. You don't get that anywhere else. It's as simple as that. Come join us at LettermenRow.com. Come hang out on the Lettermen Lounge message board. We talk about the Buckeyes 365 days a year. Matt on the recruiting trail, Tim in the building, Andy in the building, me. Whenever we need to be in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, we are there to talk to the coaches about Ohio State tight ends. That's what we do. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to another offseason report, Tight Ends Edition, presented by Buyers Auto. We'll see you next week for Running Backs Week at LettermenRow.com.